Okay, it's 10:05 and we'll begin with our summer Zoom gathering. My name is Reverend John Turner. This is the third week and it's my turn to present. So I'd like to begin with Gasho. If you could put your hands together. Namo Amida Butsu, 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 Namo Amida Butsu. So, these are somewhat of an informal gathering, and each sensei can kind of format it as they would like. There are a lot of freedom in this venue. So today, I think I'd like to mainly treat this as an adult study or adult discussion. I'd like to explore and discuss the concept of Buddha nature with you. So, I'd like your feedback. We don't have to wait to the end. I just would like to present these ideas to you. Shinran Shonin, in his Kyogyo Shinsho, he doesn't ever quote the Lotus Sutra. He quotes the larger sutra for good reason. That's one of our foundational texts. But he also quotes the Nirvana Sutra a lot. And I was able to get a hold of the first volume translation of the Nirvana Sutra by Professor Mark Blum. And when I read it, I could hear Shinran's voice. A lot of the language and the style of explanation reminded me of Shinran. So, and another aspect of this is sometimes the Amida Buddha story in the United States is confusing to people, especially with a Christian background. Sometimes it sounds like a literal person or a god or a deity. Buddha nature might be a way or a doorway or a possibility for us to explain Amida Buddha to people in a way that maybe is a little bit more accessible. Sometimes I've even played with the idea that maybe Dharmakara Bodhisattva is playing the role of Buddha nature, or you could think of the larger sutra as a creation myth of how all beings are one and we're all embraced by ultimate reality, or by realizing our true nature, our Buddha nature, represented as Amida Buddha in our tradition. Shinran doesn't mention Buddha nature a lot. We don't use that term a lot in our tradition, but he does use it sometimes. And he does do like a transitive equality between Amida Buddha, a mind that's single, other power, and Buddha nature. So what I'd like to do is share my screen with you. I've got more than enough slides to fill up the time we'll have together. And this actually is kind of the makings of a course on Buddha nature for everydaybuddhist.org, our online school that we have. So this is kind of a course in the making. And this is an example or an image of an actual Chinese version of the Nirvana Sutra, dating from maybe about the 6th century of the Common Era. And then the word nirvana, I think, is a little confusing. Here is an image of the Buddha at 35 years old. This is in the morning. He's facing east. He's looking at the morning star, and he's under a Bodhi tree, and he realizes nirvana or awakening in the morning. And when they talk about the Buddha's awakening, there's these kind of establishing shots they use. So if they ever talk about nirvana in the morning or under the Bodhi tree or facing east, it always refers to this first awakening at 35 after he practiced for 6 years, from 29 to 35. And then, of course, he gets up and he goes out and he shares what he's experienced with others using words and language. And one Pure Land Buddhist scholar actually said this is when Pure Land Buddhism began. It's when the Buddha got up from his silence and began to articulate the experience of awakening through words and language. This is how Pure Land Buddhism works. We rely on words and language to access this ultimate truth or reality in our lives. And then we have this second awakening event that I think gets conflated. These two events get conflated, I think, in English. The Buddha passes away now at 80 after a 45-year teaching career. He has his 5 or 6 main disciples in front of him. One of them is Ananda. And also what's neat about this is there's monks and nuns back to the left, but there's also everyday lay people and royalty to the right. So this one's different. He's 80 years old, and rather than sitting and facing east, he's lying down with his head pointing north and looking to the west. And it's in the evening, and it's between 2 sala trees. So, you know, these elements of the story signal to you which one we're talking about. And when I read the sutras, they'll always say, awakening under the twin sala trees or awakening under the Bodhi tree. These are different events. One is partial awakening at 35, and this is kind of a complete awakening as one realizes the end of their life. So in a sense, he's facing the Western Pure Land, and he's realizing a complete and perfect nirvana. And then I wanted to give you a couple of books, a bibliography. This is the Nirvana Sutra, volume 1 on the left, translated by Professor Dr. Mark Blum. I really liked it. When you read these kind of Mahayana texts, at least when I read them, I just let them wash over me. It's how it makes me feel. I read it as literature. I don't read it for doctrine or facts. I don't read it literally, but I just read it. There's a lot of repetition in it because it's waves of ideas coming at you, and until they finally are experienced in your heart. So I didn't worry too much about understanding. I worried more about the feeling of it. And the full name of this sutra, this is why I think it's confusing. This sutra is about parinirvana, when the Buddha passes away, and the formal title is the Maha Parinirvana Sutra, and Maha means great. So this is the great end of life awakening of the Buddha. And this Maha is the same great or big that we use in Mahayana, the great vehicle. You also have Mahatma Gandhi, the great Maha. So, you know, the full title is the Maha Parinirvana Sutra, and this is only volume 1. So in our tradition, we mainly read the larger sutra, but that's because we call it that because it's larger than the smaller sutra. They both had the same title. So to differentiate them, we called one larger and one smaller, but it really isn't that long. The larger sutra is not very large. So we're pretty lucky in our tradition. It's hard to understand, and it's deep, and it requires many readings, but it's not that long. The Nirvana Sutra, this is, you know, 200 or 300, 400 pages, and it's only volume 1. There's 3 more volumes to come. And I don't know if Mark Blum is going to be able to accomplish this in his lifetime. And then, so that's a sutra. It says right there, it's a sutra. So the words of the Buddha. And then to the right is another book that I've read and that I enjoyed a lot. It's a shastra. And that means it's a commentary. So most of what we read in Buddhism in the United States are commentaries. A lot of the books at Amazon and Barnes and Noble, in one way or another, are kind of a commentary on explaining a sutra. So this is a Buddha nature shastra commentary. And so this kind of explains with examples and similes and explanation of what's going on in the Nirvana Sutra. And then it's difficult to find books in English on Buddha nature. This is one of the best. Sally B. King. This is an excellent book. I don't know how accessible or available or affordable this book is, but this is one of the best books, and maybe one of the only books written in English about the importance of Buddha nature in the Buddhist tradition. And then the first book I ever read on Buddhism was the one on the left. Awakening the Buddha Within. And, this kind of appealed to me. This is awakening to one's Buddha nature, to realizing what one already has, one's true self. I also was a sucker for statues of the Buddha. This title and this image was probably designed for newcomers. And so this book has kind of that sense of drawing something out that is within you, rather than changing yourself. And then this book on the right is very contemporary, Sharon Salzberg. It's about faith. And I usually don't use this word because it has a lot of Christian connotations, but faith in the sense of confidence or being single-minded. You have the Lakers had faith in Phil Jackson. The UCLA Bruins had faith in John Wooden. It's that kind of faith. When you go to a doctor, you have faith and confidence, and you can trust them, and you take their word for it because they have experience and they've treated this before, and they know what they're doing. So, and it actually says here, the subtitle or the tagline, trusting your own deepest experience is how she might define faith. So I have some quotes from Sally B. King from Buddha Nature, the book, and I think this is actually on page 1. So she says, the concept of Buddha nature, though little discussed in Western surveys of Buddhism, is one of the most important ideas in East Asian Buddhism, or we might call Mahayana Buddhism. In its simplest form, the Buddha nature concept provides the answer to a question with which the ancient Chinese were very much concerned. Are all beings capable of attaining Buddhahood, or are there some who will never be free of the sufferings of samsara? And these people, the people that have no chance, no hope, are called Icchantikas. And this was kind of a debate. Are there people where the Buddhist way is unavailable to them or not effective? And I think she goes on to answer her own question. She said, Buddha nature theory answers without equivocation. All sentient beings possess the Buddha nature and thus are guaranteed the realization of Buddhahood. The belief in the Icchantika, the one forever incapable of attaining Buddhahood, is expressly rejected. At its basis, then, the Buddha nature concept is an optimistic and encouraging doctrine. So I wanted to talk about this a little bit. Buddhism, probably like most things, is kind of a pendulum. And sometimes it swings too far to monastic precepts. Sometimes it swings way too far to academic and intellectual and philosophical presentations. For example, Zen and Pure Land Buddhism were kind of reactions to this highly hyper academic philosophical form of Buddhism that was popular in China. And so Zen and Pure Land Buddhism was a Buddhism that was experiential. It wasn't as doctrinal. It was more practice-oriented. And somebody asked, is there a Buddha Nature PDF by Sally B. King online? I think there might be. I always do that. I always search the internet. I always Google the title of a book, and then I type in the word PDF. And I've been able to find a lot of these books as PDFs. And then you don't have to print it if you don't want to. You can just download it to your machine. And then it makes it really easy to search for quotes like the ones I'm using here. So the idea here is that awakening is something that all the requirements have been met. There's nothing you have to do. There's nothing you have to change to have the qualifications for awakening. But it does go on to say that the difficult part is that this is has an aspect of inconceivability. This sounds too easy. It can't be true. We don't have faith. It must have to do with me and how I behave and how I can change myself through practice. So, Shinran may not talk a lot about Buddha nature, but he talks a lot about calculation. Our self-centered self-power mind is always calculating on how to make, to get rewards and to how to acquire things, and to accept the fact that there's nothing you need to do or change is a difficult, it's very, it's one of the most difficult things for people to really believe with faith and have confidence. We always are trying to hedge our bets with good luck charms, with trying to gain merit. And this actually is kind of counterproductive, because it's based on a fallacy that somehow we're wanting or missing something. But on the other hand, it's an ontological fact, but rarely do we experience it. One of the analogies I use with Buddha nature is the relationship between a wave and the ocean. You know, and if we push this metaphor, the wave thinks it's self-sufficient, it's rising on the surface of the water, and it doesn't appreciate the fact that its essence is no different than the ocean itself. Most waves, most people, we live on the surface. We don't have depth. We don't appreciate our true essence. And we're always looking to somehow improve our lot in life. And this is very counterproductive. So next. So this is a quote from that Shastra, page 155. So this is like explaining things in more detail. It says, likewise, the precious treasure of Buddha nature is contained within the minds of all sentient beings. This is the true state of mind, which is by nature free from defilement. To this true state, no quality that was previously not present needs to be added. No defilement is to be removed from it, since the defilements to be abandoned are not truly existent. So they're not true and real. They're there, but they're not true and real. So then it goes on to say, this is kind of the first half of the quote was the positive part. The second half of the quote is kind of the negative part from page 155. Nevertheless, sentient beings do not realize that this true state is present within themselves. Therefore, although the direct manifestations of qualities is at hand, they must continuously experience deprivation of the manifold aspects of the suffering of samsara. So, you know, we have it, but we can't see it and we don't appreciate it. And we're living in a world of calculation and self-improvement, never ending self-improvement to be worthy or different. So there's nothing a wave has to do to share its essence with the ocean. But most people live their whole lives, like I said, on the surface. So I've got these in here interspersed every once in a while. If anybody has a question so far, they could ask it or they could put it in the chat. The next clip I have, or the next slide, is a clip from The Dark Knight Rises, the Batman movie that I love so much with Christopher Bale. It's from 2012. And he's at the bottom of a dark pit. He's in a prison. You know, you could say he's in a self-imposed prison. A lot of these scenes are metaphorical, and you could take them on a literal meaning or a metaphorical meaning. So, you know, he's in prison, but you could argue he's in the prison of his own making, of his own mind. And all you have to do is climb out of the hole. All you have to do is climb up the side of the wall, and you'll be out in the daylight, out in an awakened land. But nobody has faith or confidence that they can climb this wall on their own. They somehow need help. They need something extra, that they're not worthy, and what they have at their disposal is not sufficient. So everybody wants to climb this wall using a rope, a crutch. They can't let go of the rope. But the rope is so heavy that this is why they can't reach the top. It's actually this rope is what weighs them down. You could argue that self-improvement is what weighs us down for seeing the world as it is. We always want it to be different, and that's why we suffer. So there's an old man there, his teacher, his Buddha, that tells him to make the climb and let go of the rope and trust yourself. You have everything you need. everybody could have just climbed out of the prism. There was, all you have to do is just climb up the side of the wall, but nobody does it. Nobody thinks it's a possibility. So I wanted to share that with you.
Then make the climb. As the child is. Without the rope. Then fear will find you again.
Ah, supplies for your journey. Oh, that's wonderful. That's
What does that mean?
rice.
No.
So I always thought that all those people down there were chanting Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. So, he was able to transcend the imagined self and rely and realize the true self. And by doing so, he was lighter and he was able to get out of this dark hole and out into the light of day. So I really like this as a metaphor of confidence, faith, and relying on the self, the true self, rather than an imagined, improved ego self. So I wanted to go over a little bit more about Buddha nature. It's unique to Mahayana Buddhism. You can find kind of vestigial hints of this in Theravadan Buddhism, but it really comes to fruition as a philosophical statement in Mahayana Buddhism. And I like this question. I think this came from the Shastra. Why does the Buddha teach Buddha nature, not what is Buddha nature? So he teaches about it, but he never really explains what it is. And that's because the Buddha nature has meaning. It's not a substance. So there's kind of a backlash when the pendulum swings. Buddha nature is not a substance. It's not a thing. It's in a sense, all the causes and conditions. We're all interrelated and we're all one with this ocean of causes and conditions. So Buddha nature has meaning. It's not a thing. It's not a substance. So, some people criticize Buddha nature for re-injecting a permanent self back into Buddhism, but it's not suggesting that. It's the true self is non-self. And then this is another example. One of the great koans in Buddhism was, does a dog have Buddha nature? And I really like this. I love dogs, so the answer to this question immediately was yes. But you have to know the context. In the Middle East, in India, in China at this time, dogs were thought of almost like hyenas or scavengers, like rats. So this would, like today, if I wanted to ask the same question, I'd have to say, does a silverfish have Buddha nature? I really don't like silverfish. So it's that kind of a question. Is the grossest, stinkiest, ickiest animal you could think of, does it have Buddha nature? And so saying yes is a little harder in that case. But what Zen Master Dogen does to answer this koan is and this happens a lot, Captain Kirk did this on the Kobayashi Maru test he took. He changed the question. He changed he changed the game, the rules of the game. So Dogen would say that the question's wrong. It's not, does a dog have Buddha nature? It's that a dog is Buddha nature. So it's not a having thing, it's an is thing. And I see a comment here by Richard that said, I read that Buddha nature is not within us innate. This would imply it is permanent, which is contradictory to basic Buddhist understanding. Further, Buddhist nature is more like the environment. So this is what the book Sally B. King was pushing against. I don't have the slide here, but there's a book called Pruning the Bodhi Tree. And some Japanese scholars wrote this big academic essay about how Buddha nature and Tathagata Garbha theory is not Buddhist because it's injecting a permanent self back into Buddhism. And then Sally King wrote a very sophisticated scholarly reply saying why Buddha nature is impeccably Buddhist. And she's saying it is not injecting a permanent self. It's just, we are all one. We are all causes and conditions. We're all connected. This is our inherent nature. And so it's not a having thing, it's an is thing. So that article by Sally B. King is really good, but that book's hard to find. It's called Pruning the Bodhi Tree. So there's kind of two approaches in Buddhism. And I think this is why sometimes we get confused when we read books. And I think you need both of these. And I think Shinran does both. He realizes that his mind is defiled. And at the very same time, he's the sole target of Amita's compassion. So you could argue that you have to hold both of these in your head at the same time. But what happens in Buddhism a lot is the pendulum swings either far too negative or far too positive. And negative in the sense that Nagarjuna's emptiness theory, no self, it's just constant, relentless negation. And Sally B. King says that that may work in a philosophical setting, but it doesn't really nurture the heart. It doesn't sustain us. And it's dry. It's very philosophical and dry. So the first one, negation, we want to negate this imagined ego self, and we want to negate delusions. I would argue maybe that Shinran would say we don't get rid of our delusions, but at least we see them as delusions. I mean, I haven't really changed. My brain still does what it does, but at least I see it now. I know my delusions are delusions. And so in a sense, they don't have the same hold on me that they used to. But I'm still the same. I mean, everything's still the same. I just see it differently. And so there's also a needed affirmation. This is the positive part. You can't tell somebody only negative things. There has to be some sense of affirmation. And I think the Pure Land Sutras do this. There is a true self, this connected oneness. And wisdom and compassion is something that's all about us. So here's some examples of negation. We are just bones, flesh, and waste, tied together by skin. That is all the body is. As a whole, attractive, taken apart, disgusting. Behold its true nature, a disgusting bundle of waste. All parts are impermanent, subject to disease, decay, old age, and death. So, this is true, but it can be a bit unrelentingly depressing. So you can, there's a sense of affirmation. The body is like a foul-smelling aranda flower, but producing the most wonderful fragrance of sandalwood. My body is like the aranda, but my mind is like sandalwood. That is why I'm overjoyed, for here in this life, I have attained the most exalted reward. The gods Indra and Brahma come to make offerings to me. So, and I thought this was nice. I found this on the internet. I thought faith was only something we talked about in Pure Land Buddhism. Faith in Amida. It sounded, it can sound Christian to newcomers, but it says that faith is a major cornerstone of Mahayana Buddhism. The role of faith in Mahayana Buddhism is, if anything, even stronger. Its depth and range become intensified, particularly in the Buddha Nature Sutras and the Pure Land literature. So, they had a Pacific seminar yesterday at the Jodo Shinshu Center, and almost all the things in Pure Land Buddhism are basic elements of Mahayana Buddhism. I think sometimes we like our school so much that we make it seem a little too unique, and sometimes I think it puts us on an island. We share all the major doctrinal and philosophical and spiritual themes of Mahayana Buddhism. So, I mean, that's our home. So for somebody to say that Pure Land Buddhism doesn't seem Buddhist, or it doesn't seem to be part of Mahayana Buddhism, they said at the seminar that drives them crazy. It makes them see red. So it says here, for Mahayana faith, the Buddha ascribes a foundational position to faith. He states, we say that unsurpassed awakening, or bodhi, has faith as its cause. The causes of awakening are innumerable, but if stated as faith, this covers everything. So, you have to have confidence. You have to believe in the path. Just like going to a gym, you have to believe there's efficacy there. When I had a friend of mine that had cancer, and I went with him to the doctor, and he looked at my friend and he said, if you do everything I tell you and you follow my instructions, you will be cured. He goes, I've seen your cancer 100 times before. I know the DNA blueprint of your cancer. This is an old fight I've had many times. I'm familiar with it. You're going to be all right. And we believed him. We believed him. And we did what he told us. And we followed the regimen, and the cancer was cured. And so I wanted to give you this quote from Shinran. Like I said, he doesn't use Buddha nature a lot. This is even in our service book. I like to quote this at our services from our service book. So here, everything's all wrapped up together. He says, the person who attains faith and joy, it is taught, is equal to the Tathagatas, to the Buddhas. Great Shinjin, or the diamond-like mind, the mind that is pure and focused, is itself Buddha nature. Buddha nature is none other than the Tathagata. So I kind of like this. It's A equals B, B equals C, C equals D. So A equals D. This is the adamantine mind, great Shinjin, to be completely focused and bought in and locked in to the path. And then we don't have time for this today. I'd like to maybe stop at 10:40 and take questions, but these are the things that are covered in the Nirvana Sutra. So it covers Buddha nature as a fact, as an existential fact. Then it covers the importance of faith, that this fact is true. But this is the most difficult of all difficulties, it says in the larger sutra, to I mean, we could talk about Buddha nature, but we don't really live our lives as if it actually was true. Faith is the problem. Doubt is the poison. And the reason why is it's inconceivable. We've been taught our whole lives to be better, to be different. Tara Brock on YouTube the other day said, the reason why we like guilt and we blame ourselves all the time is because we really want to hold on to this imagined sense of self-control. I'd rather blame myself and be guilty about things in my life than to accept the fact that I don't have ultimate control of the events in my life. So, we blame ourselves and we feel guilty because we can't give up this idea that we have free will. And so it makes it inconceivable. It also talks about defilements, that we have the defilements backwards. We defile, we see the self as impermanent, and we see we have permanence and impermanence backwards, that we've overdone it. Number 5 is the Icchantika that we talked about, that this is a kind of a restatement of Amida Buddha, that every being is embraced by wisdom and compassion. There's nothing that disqualifies you. There's also an exclusion clause in the Nirvana Sutra, like it is in the 18th vow in Pure Land Buddhism. The exclusion clause is something to the effect that you are an Icchantika if the deeds you do don't upset you, if the things you do doesn't cause you pause, if you're completely unaware of the things you do that are unwholesome, then you're an Icchantika. And then number 7 is the awakening of bodhicitta. And this is a big controversy in Jodo Shinshu. Honen said that you can be embraced by Amida and realize this adamantine mind without having a bodhi, without desiring or seeking awakening. And Honen was kind of criticized for that. But it says it actually in the Nirvana Sutra. You can realize the path and realize awakening without, there's even the prerequisite of desiring Buddhahood is not needed for one to realize faith. So, faith is like the beginning and the end. It's the, what do they call it? The Omega and the Alpha. So I think we will stop here. I have another 20 or 30 slides because I'm preparing this for a course on everydaybuddhist.org. But with about 40 minutes left, I'd like to see if anybody has any comments or thoughts or questions. So anyway, this is a major part of Mahayana Buddhism, and I think it's something we should think about. And if you never get a hold of that first volume of the Nirvana Sutra, I really heard Shinron's voice. It sounded a lot like the Kyogyo Shinsho to me. I think it was a real influence. And I actually asked Professor Mark Blum if that was the case, and he winked and said, well, he probably cussed a little bit, but he said, yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. Mark Blum can be salty.
Can you hear us?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, it's Jim with Janice here. I think you've forced all of our videos off somehow, but
oh, I can change that
in case anybody wants to come on.
Oh, sorry, that wasn't me. It's I'll change it. Thanks for telling me. There you go. I'm using a different account, so that one of those settings were there.
Well, maybe it's at our end. Sorry. I don't think we're going to have the camera, but say, Shinron quotes a large section of the Nirvana Sutra having to do with the story of Ajatashatru, who is identified as the Icchantika.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think, I'm not remembering exactly what you said, but it seems that the Icchantika does exist in that tale.
Mm-hmm.
But then what happens to the Icchantika is the key.
Yes.
And you had several other quotations. The sandalwood had no root in Ajatashatru, but yet appears. So it seems that he had to understand himself as Icchantika.
Yes.
Previously, he lacked that awareness.
Right. And that was that quote I gave from the Nirvana Sutra. Icchantikas are people who aren't concerned with what they do, or their bad deeds doesn't bother them. So in that sense, they're not available.
And so at that stage, he could not be liberated, but understanding that Ajatashatru was Icchantika, that became his liberation. I think this is what you're saying.
Yeah, and some people say that about the 18th vow. When you identify with the exclusion clause, then you are accepted. I've had ministers explain it that way.
So when the author said Icchantikas don't exist, that's not quite right from Shinran's perspective.
Right.
They have to recognize themselves as such.
Yes.
Which becomes their liberation.
Yeah, you should have used the word permanent. It's not a permanent state.
Well, she may not have been writing from a Shinshu perspective, which is okay. She doesn't have to, but.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about Shinran is he quotes that story from the Nirvana Sutra and not from the Contemplation Sutra. So that's interesting too.
I think Marcia might have a comment.
Hey, Marcia.
No, good morning. I was just confused because I thought I heard now two definitions for Icchantika. So it seems like one way that people understood it was there are people who can never attain this. And then another way to understand it is just kind of a state of like not being aware and not even caring to be aware. Is that right? So there's
Yeah,
that
so I think
makes sense why there's two.
Yeah.
If you understand it in two different ways, then that makes sense why there's contradictory thoughts about what would happen.
Yes.
Okay.
Here, let me show you another slide I have real quick. So this is the thing there's a Zen site called Buddhism by Numbers, and down here in red, there's actually two types of Icchantikas depending on maybe what school you're in. Number two, those who are indefinitely so lacking. So it's impossible. There's no hope. They'll never realize awakening no matter what they do. And then number one, those who are momentarily lacking the parinirvana dharma. So there is kind of like, I think that different schools look at it different ways, but the Nirvana Sutra is saying you are an Icchantika. It's not permanent. You can always like realize the mess you're in and feel sorrow and ashamed for it. And then you're, in a sense, you're on your way once you see yourself clearly.
Yeah, so the way I really like this, before I came to OCBC, I used to think of that one of the things I really liked about Buddhism was everybody has Buddha nature, everyone can attain liberation, but the idea that everybody has Buddha nature and people are, in my mind, doing the best they can and with what they've got, and it kind of helps you have empathic response and compassionate response. And one of the things that I sometimes hear or read in Buddhism, even like Jodo Shinshu ministers will talk about how we are flawed by like that we start out kind of like selfish and greedy, and they talk about like infants and toddlers being that way, and I really don't agree. So in infant and early childhood mental health, it's really not perceived that way. We think of like infants are pure, and if they are raised with compassion and nurturing, they understand the world around them from a different perspective. But if you're caretaker, like if you cry and no one responds to hunger and you have hunger pains, your parasympathetic nervous system acts in a way, and you then are kind of even physiologically change to react to stress and things in a different way. So that idea to me that we're born in this, like, with all this kind of like baggage and we have to then undo it, I've never agreed with that. I've always sort of thought like, no, we're born with this Buddha nature, and sometimes life, and then we learn these things, and then we have to kind of unlearn these things. So yeah, anyway, I really appreciate this. And I'm thinking maybe everybody, maybe even like within our own school, maybe even within Jodo Shinshu, people have different perspectives about the those two definitions. Like, I'm wondering.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Marcia. Yeah, so I don't know, this Buddha nature doctrine might give us a wedge that we could use to kind of balance some of those messages. Any other thoughts or comments?
Bill.
Hey, Bill.
Morning. I'm a little bit confused about the relationship of Buddha nature and Shinjin. Is it the same? The connotation is that it is not, but it has similarities and it relates. It probably would be a nice discussion topic of what is that relationship between those names or terms?
Well,
Because
that,
they're
yeah.
both not substance.
Yeah, so let me show that quote from Shinran again. So this is, out of our service book. I think he's saying that, realizing great Shinjin is itself Buddha nature.
So you're saying that Shinjin is Buddha nature.
It's a realization of
It's a
one's,
realization of Buddha nature.
yeah.
So, okay.
In Mahayana Buddhism, it's kind of frustrating, but everything's always the same thing. So, when a person realizes faith and joy and realizes this adamantine mind, this is experiencing one's Buddha nature.
If I could just throw in a comment, Buddha nature would be seen as something broader than Shinjin. So they're not, we wouldn't say they're identically equal, 100% equal. Rather, you could actually call it something different. The difficulty with calling it Buddha nature, well, Buddha is a person. So now I start to personalize. There's a Buddha in me that I start to personalize, but it might be better, rather than going that route, to call it Dharma nature. In other words, reality itself.
Yes.
Obviously, we cannot be separate, at a basic level. We are not separate from limitless reality, but our perspective is so narrow that we become confused about that. So you could say, in fact, Shinran uses the term Dharma nature too, in kind of these strings of equalities.
Right.
So you might think about it that way, Bill. And in that way, Dharma nature, you can maybe more easily envision, this is something it characterizes the universe. So it's not something I own.
Right.
That's all I had to say.
Yeah, and sometimes in the text, I think this is confusing too. A lot of times Buddha refers to a person or a being, but like Jim was saying, sometimes Buddha represents ultimate reality, truth itself, oneness, ultimate truth. So, that meaning of that word shifts depending on context.
Yeah, I was wondering, in one of your slides, it said Buddha says and somewhere you use the pronoun he. So then I thought, is that meaning the historical Buddha?
Right.
Because the pronouns there.
Well, I know, and we even do that with Amida Buddha too. I cringe when we say, whenever we refer to Amida Buddha as a he, I get nervous about that because it sounds like a being.
Yeah, I was thinking when I read that today, I never had this thought. I was like, oh, what if we use the pronoun they for like, not the historical Buddha?
And supposedly in Japan, I mean, I took Japanese and I didn't get great grades, and I assume this is true, but they don't have pronouns in Japanese. So, you know, they use like a lot of synonyms. Like sometimes when you read quotes in the service book, like even here with Shinran, he's using these all as synonyms. Like Jim said, they're not equal, but they're all related. And so when they talk about Amida Buddha, they'll say Amida Buddha, and then they'll say infinite light and life, or infinite wisdom and compassion, or the Tathagata. So that happens a lot in Japanese texts. They use a lot of synonyms because they don't really have pronouns. And it would be boring to say Amida Buddha, Amida Buddha, Amida Buddha, Amida Buddha over and over and over again.
Well, I really didn't understand the answer to Bill's question at all. And actually what you all were saying was kind of the opposite of what I was thinking it might be. But
I think of
if
Buddha
someone else has
nature
another question, that's great. But if not, I'm
Yeah.
like, is there another way to answer that question?
I mean, I always just fall back to the metaphor of the wave to the ocean, right? We're all connected. We're not independent actors. You know, it's a matter of realization, not achievement.
But in that analogy, like which would it be Dharma nature and what would be Shinjin? Or is it both? They're both the ocean.
I think Shinjin is a state of mind, is a realization of that relationship.
Thank you.
You know, I kind of get fall back on something you just said, Marcia, in that, you know, we all as sentient beings have Buddha nature within us, in that we have that capability because of our consciousness to have Buddha nature within us. I think what you're saying, just as you said before, you nurture that Buddha nature with experience, whatever, and that develops your Shinjin that's within you, to have, you know, an understanding and awakening, perhaps. It is the same thing, but it's a level, or I don't know, something kind of like what Jim said of Dharma. I mean, you nurture it with Dharma and understanding, I guess. I don't know, that makes a little bit of sense to me personally.
The other thing that I think happens too, we don't have the English language, we don't have the vocabulary to discuss oneness and emptiness. Our language is very dualistic. And, you know, that's why I kind of like to read the text as poetry. We don't have the language for this. It's hard for us to use words that don't infer an essence or a substance or something permanent. It's not Buddha nature is not a thing. Everything's a process. So it's very hard for us to use language in that way. Which is why I think we have to rely on myth and poetry. Okay, well, it's just about 11 o'clock. Any other comments? All right, well, I thank you all for attending. We could close with Gasho, and next week will be Janice Hirohama at the controls. So thank you very much. Namo Amida Butsu. 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 Namo. All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Reverend John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Sensei.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.